And we're live. Let me get started. I'm going to add my friend for today's chat.
Well, hello.
Hello.
You are quite possibly the quickest response I've ever had to that.
You're welcome.
See, you're killing it. You're killing it. Are you doing it on your phone, or are you
Yep.
doing it? Okay, I was gonna say, I'm like, if you figure out a way to do it on the laptop, so Instagram, I know you're listening somewhere, make it a functionality
Yeah.
to allow people to go live with a laptop.
That would be nice.
It would be nice. Yeah, this is always a whole thing. I have to like set up the camera and yeah. But how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right. So, everybody listening later or watching live now, as you know, my name is Will Craig, or Will Mental Health to Will, as I'm commonly known on the social media world. And today, for our Sunday Reset with Will and Friends, I've got a special guest. She is affectionately referred to in my house by many names. I call her Lex. We also call her Shirley Worley, as my wife just put in the comments. But Alexis Lees is joining us today. How, how are you, Lex?
I'm good. Excited.
You excited?
Nervous. A little
You're
nervous.
nervous? Why are you nervous?
I don't know. I've never done something like this before.
That's what makes it fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it fun. Yeah, I mean, I get it. You know, I started doing all this stuff, and then people in my life started coming around. So for those who don't know, yeah, so Lex was actually in my wedding. She was a bridesmaid. Yeah, she was a bridesmaid at my wedding.
It's a good time.
I'm glad it was a good time. I was gonna say, if it's not, please give the feedback.
No, it was good.
It's good. And you know, Lex is one of the most singularly strong people that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing for a number of reasons. And she doesn't know this, but when I first started this series, in my mind, I had someone like her in mind of who I wanted to come on this, because it's so easy when you see people that are on podcasts. You always feel like you see the same guests on the same podcast and everything all the time because they're all in the same circles and stuff. And I'm not against that, but I care so deeply about mental health, and I wanted to get people who didn't necessarily share their story everywhere, but have very real and important stories along the way. And so you didn't know this, but I was hoping you were going to reach out because I would never ask you to do this.
Right. That's very sweet.
Yeah, it means a lot to me that you were willing to take this plunge with me. I trust that you know that you're in good hands. But
I am.
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, as you said, my name's Alexis. I'm 29 years old, recently engaged.
Ooh.
Yeah. I grew up with 4 brothers, middle child. Parents got divorced when I was 6 months old, so I was raised by my stepdad and my mother. Have a little corgi. You might hear him running around.
What's his name?
His name is Bruno.
Well, we don't talk about Bruno.
We do talk about Bruno. This Bruno.
Because he's not that
No.
Bruno. He is. Wait, who's he named after?
Oh, there he goes. Bruno Mars, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Not Encanto. But I am a surgical technologist. I work for one of the bigger hospitals here in Greenville. I work in gastroenterology, so colonoscopies, EGDs, and we have some more advanced procedures that we do. But people don't really know about those. So if we want to dive into that, I guess we can. It's kind of boring stuff. I don't know. What else do you want to know?
Well, let's start with this. Why is it you think I wanted you to come on here?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess someone who doesn't really talk about their story very much and just is the average person that deals with mental health. Kind of give insight into the fact that the average girl could have some things that people don't necessarily know about. and we may seem happy and go lucky and tough on the outside, but on the inside, we struggle every day to day, just like you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've gotten to see it firsthand with you.
You
Um,
have.
yeah, I've gotten to see it firsthand with you, but I've got to see a number of things. So I think a good place to start would be I commonly refer to it as a mental health journey because there's not a clear starting and stopping point. That's not how mental health works, at least not in my opinion. Um, so, where would you say if you were going to write the story of Alexis Lees, soon to be maybe Alexis Peer? Are you going to take Andy? Are you going to take
Yes.
Andy's last name?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought I knew that, but I wanted to confirm. So, if you were going to tell the story specifically of your mental health journey, how would you start?
Um, well, I was always an anxious kid growing up. My mom would call me her little worry wart. I worried about everybody and everything possible under the sun. But I think I really started to focus on it in middle school. My parents were going through a hard time, and unfortunately, I was always thrown in the middle of their issues. So they got me into therapy, and it was the worst experience of my life. My therapist was awful. Um, she just put the blame on me and said, I am the way that I am because of myself, not the things around me,
And
which
how
is
and how old were you?
probably 14, maybe 13, very young, very impressionable. Um, yeah, so that was awful. So I stopped going. I told my mom, I can't do this. And for so long, I put the blame on myself and not the circumstances around me. But if anyone else was in my shoes, I feel like they wouldn't necessarily do that. Like they would have said, oh, it's my circumstances. Oh, it's my parents. Oh, it's this, it's that. But no, in my head, it was me. It was all my fault. So throughout this whole journey, even up to 3 years ago, I said it's my fault. And that's so far from the truth.
So, when you say it's your fault, like what does that mean to you now?
Um, I often I'll share these little things on Facebook. Like if I could go back and hug my younger self, I would so hard and tell her it's not your fault. It's not anything that you did. Like you are amazing for what you went through and you're still so grounded and so positive. And I guess thinking it's my fault just because that therapist told me, um, it's your fault. That just stuck in my head so much. So I thought maybe the world was against me or people weren't in my corner. And that, like I keep saying, is so far from the truth. Like I have learned that I have a great tribe around me. I have so many resources and so many friends and family that are in my corner. Um, that I'm not alone and it's not necessarily my fault. And now I have the resources, therapy, a psychiatrist, and all those people that are telling me that therapist was so wrong for telling you that. And it's not your fault. It never has been your fault. You were put in impossible situations and you just grew around them. You grew where you were planted and you became this beautiful person.
Yeah, it's that's a great way to look at it from like, going back to your younger self. I mean, I always say the first thing I would do is give that kid a hug.
Hmm.
Just give him a hug. And not to, it wasn't like I wasn't hugged. My parents were very affectionate people, and that's not what I mean at all. I just mean, when I say a kid, for me, most of mine, where it came to a halt was when I was about 19, 20. That's where I think a lot of shit really started on my end. So, but going back to your story, so you get told this information that, it's your fault, which, is such a horrible thing to say to a
Right.
14-year-old. We could talk about that for a long time, but let's leave that for there for now. So now you're 15, you're 16. So what is the mental health journey then look at that point, like going forward?
Neglected for sure.
As in you neglected it. Got it.
Yes. Um, so going back to when I was 13 or 14, I saw my therapist's notes, which I don't think anyone should ever see their therapist's notes.
I've offered money and they won't give them to me. So
I just saw her writing stuff down and it said extreme depression, extreme anxiety. So in my head, I was like, oh my God, I'm this depressed person. I'm this anxious little ridden person. That's who I am. That defines me. And that's not true. So it probably wasn't until I was 20, what was I, 24, 25? I started thinking about it more. So a decade went by before I even addressed it. And I think that is more common than we realize because a lot of people just think it's normal life and it's not. You don't have to live like you're walking on eggshells all the time. And you don't have to struggle through day-to-day life. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
no, it's okay. That's the beautiful part about this is that this format is that it's live. So like anybody who thinks like, I love podcasts. I really do. The one thing that always is interesting to me is, there's the cutting and pasting and you can trim out things and re-say things. But so to me, when I started down this journey, I said, if I'm going to do one, I want it to be truly live because I want these authentic things. I want the tangents. I want the raw, unedited answer of what someone's going to say.
Right.
A, because I find that more genuine, and B, selfishly, I don't want to edit it at all. So, but both can be true. Okay, so you said you're in your 20s, and that's when you started really thinking about it again. So before we get into that part of life, so what did that feel like for you as far as, you said from 14 to about 24, you just kind of neglected it, but like how did you operate in your day-to-day life? What was that like, a normal day?
Very stressed. Yeah, I couldn't eat right. I wouldn't say that I struggled with body image, but I kind of did, so that played into growing up. I was always one of the bigger girls growing up, bigger than my tiny ass friends. So, that kind of played a part into becoming a teenager and looking at myself thinking I'm not good enough. Um, but yeah, there were times that I had to get treated for ulcers in my stomach because I was so stressed out. They thought it was originally my gallbladder, but then he said, oh, low schmo could have a bad gallbladder and go years without getting it taken out. And so we did that and just got treated like for ulcers. And that is not common in a 16-year-old girl.
I wouldn't think so. I'm not a doctor by any means.
No, it's not.
I don't think so.
He said that it can be caused from major anxiety, major stress. So that's what we chalked it up to. And yeah, that was just kind of the norm.
So, because people say things like, I really internalized this feeling, but like you quite literally internalized this feeling, and to the point where it caused like physical pain. So, and I think that's not obviously horribly sad, but I also find it like morbidly fascinating because people, when we think about mental health, we think a lot in terms of everything up here, the emotions, all that stuff. But this is the part of the story that I don't think gets told as much, is that like the unchecked mental will interact with the physical, and vice versa, right? If you start not taking care of your physical health, that can start wearing on your mental health. Mental health is health. So I think that's a really interesting point. So you said you're 16, you get diagnosed with, first with needing to get your gallbladder removed. Then you go into, it's actually ulcers. So what do they do about that?
They just treat it with medicine.
Okay.
Antacids and stuff like that.
Antacids, got it. I mean, hey, I take Nexium every morning back here. So, I have to, so I'm with you there. I'm with you on that journey. Okay. So you mentioned though that at 24 or so, that's when you start taking it seriously. Why? Why then?
Because I was going back to school, and the first time that I went to college, I stopped going because I couldn't handle the day-to-day stress of school, working full time, managing a relationship with my people. I just couldn't do it. So I dropped out and I stopped going. And then my wonderful fiance kind of lit a fire under my ass to get my shit together. And so I went back to school and I told myself I can't do it the way I did last time. So I talked to my doctor and said, hey, I'm going back to school. I really need something to help me. Just my PCP, my normal doctor, not a psychiatrist, not a therapist. So he really didn't know how to prescribe anything based on what I was talking about. So he put me on Xanax, which is highly addictive, very scary drug in my opinion. And he said, just take this as needed at night to help you sleep. Okay, that's fine and dandy. But I told him that I needed something a little more stable to make me stable throughout the day, something I can take on a day-to-day basis that will help mellow me out.
Gotcha.
And so he put me on Zoloft, which is an antidepressant. And it was good for a while, but then fast forward to 2021, around September, I had graduated school and I was going to move to South Carolina with Andy. And my brain just went to shit. It went haywire and failed me, honestly. I was in a mental state of I'm leaving my family. I need to fix every single bridge that has been burned. I need to make sure everyone here is taken care of because I look at myself as kind of the glue of my family. That's very not humble at all, but
I think it's fair. I know your family well. I know the dynamics of your family well enough to know that that's probably a fair statement. Some of which I won't talk to, and that's for other reasons. So
yes. Yeah, so I felt like once I left, that was kind of gonna fall apart, and it really did. Like, my family kind of went to shit once I moved out, which was what I was afraid of. So I told myself I'm gonna talk to every single family member I have and make sure that we're on good terms before I leave. On top of applying for jobs in South Carolina, interviewing for jobs in South Carolina, working full time still, packing up my one bedroom apartment, just all these things were stacking on top of each other. And I put myself into a manic state. And I don't know if you know this, but if you are bipolar and you're on antidepressants, it can make you manic. So I was on Zoloft, which is an antidepressant, and Xanax, and now I have this condition, or what they labeled me as, bipolar. I have this condition that my medicine essentially made me into. It wasn't, again, I thought it was my fault. I was stressed out. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping for days. And I was so worried about everyone else that I neglected my health. But again, it wasn't my fault. It was the medication that I was taking. And so that was kind of wild. You heard about it, so you know.
Oh, yeah.
I completely was not myself. I wasn't making any sense, just talking nonsense. Andy actually flew down from South Carolina because he was so concerned. Went into an inpatient facility for, I don't know how long, 5 days, maybe 3 to 4,
that's about right.
Something like that. And then I got out. I was on different medication. I was on Zoloft still, but also an antipsychotic, which reverses the effects of the antidepressant with bipolar. So I was taking that regularly, and I was supposed to move to South Carolina within the next 2 weeks, which was kind of crazy to have this mental breakdown and then uproot your life. People were very concerned, my parents especially, but they knew Andy and trusted Andy to take care of me. And my dad had we'll say a serious talk, but it wasn't a serious talk. But he talked with him and said, you know, she has this great support system here. She has her grandparents, us, that live 2 minutes down the road. So she's not going to have that. So she's solely going to rely on you. So we did. I moved here and I was taking my medicine religiously and on time, having good sleep, not sleeping with the TV on, just really taking care of myself. And then I don't know how long into it. I was still working at the other hospital, so it was probably um probably early, no, mid 2022. I really questioned my diagnosis, and I was like, there's no way I'm bipolar. Like, if you know me, I'm not. I'm not highs and lows. I'm pretty mellow. Anxious, yes, but not like this, like you think of bipolar. So I talked to a therapist online, and he said I probably have just a generalized anxiety disorder that has manic episodes. And I was like, okay, that I can live with. That seems more reasonable in my head. And so I weaned myself off my medication without the advice of a doctor, without consulting a doctor, which is a big no-no in mental health. Like, those drugs are serious drugs. It's not like Tylenol. It's not something you can just stop taking.
No kidding.
But I was okay for a while, and then I switched jobs, and then the end of 2023, I was stressed out about my relationship, money. We had a puppy, and Andy had a big surgery. We had lost our other dog. It was just a lot of stuff that was on my plate as a young girl in her 20s, and I wasn't telling anyone about my stress. I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't in therapy anymore, and I put myself back into a manic state. But this time was so different. I just didn't sleep for a full day, and then I woke up the next morning and I was like, something's not right. I was convinced I was pregnant. Like, it was crazy stuff. And so I put my lunch bag in my car. I got dressed for work, completely manic, not myself. And then as I went to get in my car to go to work, I snapped out of it long enough to go tell Andy and wake him up and say, something's wrong. I need your help. I need medication. I need to go to sleep. Like, I knew everything that I needed to do, but I was still manic. So he got me to go to sleep. I had some medicine left over from when I stopped it. He gave me something, I think he gave me my antipsychotic. But he called his mom, got the advice that he needed to take care of me. And then I went into an inpatient facility again for 5 days. Missed a wedding because of it. I was pissed. But they told me, you're bipolar for sure. Just because you've had 2 manic episodes now, that's not normal. So you need to be taking lithium, which again is another scary drug. And a girl in her mid to late 20s who is at an age where she could get pregnant and wants to get pregnant should not be on it, because it is, you'd have to stop it cold turkey if you got pregnant. So I did that for a while, and then I started talking to the psychiatrist I'm with now. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Smith. He's great. He's been doing it longer than I've been alive. And then I started going to therapy. His name is Zach. I can't remember his last name right now, but he's great too. He's a big teddy bear. And he said, yeah, I would agree with what they said about you being bipolar, but lithium is not the drug of choice that I would choose for you because of its addictive qualities and the type of person you are, because you are at this age where you could get pregnant and you want to get pregnant at some point. You shouldn't be on this. So he switched up my regimen, and it wasn't until 2 months ago that we finally said, okay, this is what works. So it took a good 6 or 7 months to tweak everything and build up medications that go well together, and working with a therapist, talking about my struggles, my whatever. So it took a long time from when I was in Indiana, went manic, to now. That was a big chunk of time, 4 years, that I was just going up and down with my mental health. And I really focused on it in the beginning because of school, but now I'm focusing on it kind of, I want to give props to you because you kind of opened my eyes to, everybody struggles. everybody has shit that they deal with, and you have really shed a light on mental health, and it has helped me tremendously. It just really is good to know that there are people like us out there, that we are normal, we're not crazy. And yeah, that's pretty much my spiel.
Thank you for saying that. That's, I mean, before I even knew who you were, if you haven't caught on at this point, everybody, this Alexis is not my wife. My wife's name is also Alexis. Not to be confused with the other Alexis that's joined us live, who is your soon-to-be sister-in-law. Lots of Alexis floating around. But yeah, so Alexis and my wife Alexis have been friends for quite some time. And I really, really appreciate it. And even before I knew either of you, I started going down this journey with my blog. Because that exactly for what you just said. It's not, and I don't mean it to ever sound like everyone's got shit, therefore your shit's not important. That's not how I ever wanted to come across. But it's more so to shed a light in such a way that people realize that, like, odds are you are not alone in this feeling.
Exactly.
That doesn't make it any less important. That doesn't make it any less valid. What I mean is to say, whether you're talking about anxiety, depression, so many different areas of mental health, all of them, I believe, stem or can grow and get worse and worse when you sit there by yourself and you feel alone in your struggle. And so to me, the best way I knew to counteract that was putting my story out there. If I share the things that I've gone through and felt and done, at least if nothing else comes of it, at least someone somewhere out there can feel less alone in their journey. That's where all this goes. And so then it's the blog, and then it's the book, and then it's the social media, and now it's this, and all of it just stems from the same goal, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the same goal. It's how do I find different people, and how do I share in that and make people feel less alone in the journey. So I appreciate you say that, because that's been the focal point of this. And again, like, why I wanted to have this conversation with you. If you don't mind my asking, so you mentioned as part of this arc, you have these the way you worded it was manic episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know how I experienced your manic episodes, and I got to see those things.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you while they're happening, and then what was it like after the fact when you got to hear like from everybody else how they experienced it?
That is a great question. The first time and the second time were vastly different. The first time, I couldn't even tell you what I was feeling. Up the week before, I have talked with a friend about this, but before you go full on manic, you feel the best that you've ever felt. Like, it's a euphoric state. Nothing can bring you down. You're just so freaking happy. And that feels amazing. I'm not gonna lie. When nothing can bring you down, everything's going your way, you feel great. So I felt that for about a week. And what really set Andy off, I think it was the day or 2 days before I finally went fully manic the first time. I told him that I had a great day at work, and he was like, "What the hell? You hate your job." What do you mean you had a great day? I was like, yeah, I had a great day. I had fun with my boss. I had fun with my coworker. It was just a good day. And he was like, that's not normal. So that was kind of a red flag.
It's not funny, but
it is funny. It's hilarious. But
it was the red flag for your soon-to-be husband that you were happy about your day at work.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack just with that statement alone. And maybe we'll come back to it. I don't know. But I just think that's funny, and it's worth calling out. So he was thrown off by the mere fact that you said, I had a great day at work. I enjoyed my day. And I was like, ooh, Something's
Oh
not right.
no.
Something's wrong. Who did you hurt?
Right. So after that, there was a night that I had planned this little roasting session. I was manic at this point. Little roasting session with my friends because they were throwing me a going away party, and I planned to roast the shit out of all of them when I got there. Like, just made up little things about each of them to just make fun of them. I don't know why. Just funny, not like hurtful or anything. But I did that, stayed up all night, um, made a playlist for the party. I ordered tickets to go see Tech Nine for Andy and I when I got to Greenville. So I did that, or planned to do that. I don't know if I actually went through with it, which spending money while you're manic is a thing. Like, people usually blow thousands and thousands of dollars while they're manic. Luckily, I am not one of those. But I did plan to, I don't think I actually bought them, but I planned to buy the tickets when I was manic. But I felt really connected to my mother at the time and told her, in the morning we need to go to our dad's grave sites. And I don't know if you know this, but my biological dad is married on the bottom of the hill of my grandpa is. So it's kind of like really close walking distance.
Wait, you said buried, not married, right?
Right, buried.
Okay, cool.
They're both deceased.
That's what I was confused. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I'm make sure I heard that word correctly. Okay, cool.
They're buried. They're both gone now. They're in the same cemetery and really close together. So I told her we need to go take flowers up there. We need to go visit them because I'm leaving soon. I really want to say goodbye to my grandpa, goodbye to my dad. And that's not like me. I will say I'm not a good daughter when it comes to going to visit the graveyard. It's not a good time for me, so I just don't do it. My grandma can attest to that. She knows full fact that I just hate doing it. So I stayed up all night, didn't sleep at all, called into work the next morning, just told my boss I am not really feeling well. I didn't sleep at all last night. So I was aware enough to know that I was unwell, but I was still in that euphoric state, so I was fine in my head. And the craziness just sunk in. And I don't use that term lightly because my therapist said that I'm not crazy. Don't call myself crazy. But what was going on in my head was completely crazy. I was convinced that Andy and I had won some sort of competition that we get a free wedding and that he was flying down here so he could propose and we could get married. But I was also convinced that the world was ending and Jesus was coming back to save us all. And have you ever watched the show Manifest, or
No, I
haven't you
haven't.
heard of it? Okay, well, it's about this plane that goes missing, and then there's two people on there that are really, really like genius-like. And so I was convinced that Jaden, my little brother, and Andy were the people from that show, and that they were the two geniuses that were going to save the world. What else? Towards the end, after I had slept for a while, and then the next day I started making like clicking noises, like, and pointing a lot. And I told my dad that me and my boyfriend do it. Like, it just needed him to know that we are sexually active. And I
Oh
was
my
horrified
goodness.
when I heard that. I mean,
You and Andy? Oh my goodness.
he knew, but I was horrified that I told him and needed him to know. We don't talk about that. We're not like that. Um, just anything and everything could set me off. It was almost as if I had tics. Like, I'm not saying I have Tourette's or anything, but little things like people with Tourette's set them off, and they have tics based on what they see or what they hear, and I would get wrapped up in everything around me. Like, I was convinced that my little brother Jaden was going to win a car from our boss because he worked with me at the time. And something on the TV, there were two different colored trucks, and I told my dad, hey, Jaden needs to pick the red one because that's the good one. And black was evil. Good. Red was nice, and black was evil. There was just all these things, and I wish I could go back and remember every single one of them, but I can't because my brain was in this state that just didn't make sense. So it just imagine Andy explained it to me that everything is firing off in your all the cylinders in your head are firing off at the same time, and you can't make sense of what's reality and what's fake. It's kind of like that. Now, the second time that I went manic, it was completely different. I stayed up all night. I wasn't sleeping. I was convinced that I was pregnant. So I took tests the next morning. They were negative, obviously. We weren't trying to get pregnant, so it was fine. It wasn't a big deal. But after I had slept and Andy got me to go to bed, I woke up and I told him, I'm scared. I know something's wrong. It happened again. I'm mortified. I thought I had this under control. And then the guilt set in about, holy crap, I stopped taking my medicine. And it happened again. So it's obviously a real diagnosis. It's not something made up that they just slapped a sticker on it and labeled me this. It's real. And that is the moment that I realized, okay, I have issues that I need to deal with, and I can't do this on my own. But the second time, like I said, I stayed up all night. Again, I focused on Jaden being this little person that's going to save the world. No idea why. And when I was talking to Andy the next morning, I felt like I was talking to Jaden. Like, I associate them a lot when I'm manic. I don't know why. Maybe because they both mean the world to me, and they're the same in my head. I don't know. But I was talking to him as if I was talking to my little brother. I said, Jaden, you need to call mom right now. And I dead-legged him, like punched him in the leg. Don't remember doing any of this. But I think it just shows how strong I am that I was able to snap out of it, a manic state, and tell Andy that something's not right. Something's wrong. Like, he said I was giving him directions to the hospital. I was calming him down when I'm the one that needed to be calmed down. I was holding his hand and saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. So that just shows that you can be really strong as a person if you could do that. Like, it's crazy to me that I just snapped out of a completely messed up state and was completely normal, and then I would snap right back into it. It was insane. It was crazy.
You said not to say they were crazy, and then you've said it like
It
7 times
is
in this
crazy.
show.
Not that I'm crazy.
Okay, that's an important distinction, I think. It's still a good word to use, just not in that context.
Yes.
Okay, I can get that with that. I can get that with that. So, okay, so when it comes to, so you said like this time you were able to like kind of snap in and out. So then, but you said like the label. I want to go back to that for a second. I'm assuming you mean BPD?
Yeah.
Okay. So how does that then impact how you see bipolar disorder then versus now? Like how has your definition or thoughts on what that condition even means changed?
It has changed a lot because growing up, people say, "Oh, you're so bipolar. Oh, you're so this. Oh, you're so that." And in my head, before I was diagnosed, I thought bipolar was just you had these extreme highs and you have these extreme lows, and that you're just not a normal person that can live day-to-day life. Like, you're just constantly up and down. And that's not the case at all, obviously. Like, I have a completely normal life. I don't deal with the ups and the downs. Like, yeah, I can have a bad day every once in a while, but so can a random guy on the street, you know? So now it's just kind of part of who I am, but not in a negative way. I think it's kind of not cool to have it, but kind of cool to know that you can live with something like that and have a fulfilling life.
Yeah. No, I think it's an important part of a lot of these, bipolar disorder is one. I would say anxiety, or you even like the way you specifically called that generalized anxiety disorder. And like, there's levels to that as well. I mean, so many things. We have this idea. Maybe it's because of a movie we saw or a TV show, or maybe it's just someone we knew in our lives that had it, and we associate, oh, everyone that has it is it's like this, and if it's not like that, then it can't be real.
Mm-hmm.
And our misconception of how some of these things work, one I hear commonly is like autism spectrum disorder. People, when I think of autistic, they either see like the brilliant doctor who can solve everything all the time, or they see the person who can barely, form two words together, and it's like it's one or the
Mm-hmm.
other, and it's like, well, that's why it's called a spectrum disorder. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's there's a spectrum to this, and there's levels to this, and so we have these misconceptions, and so I want to kind of dive into that a little bit. So, what has, now that you've accepted your diagnosis, like what's changed in your day-to-day life as far as bipolar disorder is concerned?
Having a schedule is really important to me. Having a set sleeping schedule. I take my sleep very seriously. You can ask Andy. And during the week, I don't stay up later than 8 o'clock. I am in the bed going to sleep at 8. Just, I think that's the biggest thing that I make sure that I take care of is that schedule, and making sure I eat and I sleep. And talking about my feelings is really important now too, not bottling them up anymore. So therapy is important. My psychiatrist is important, and just being honest about my mental health. When I'm having a bad day, I tell people like, hey, if I'm down in the dumps, it's because that's how I feel. So I think just being honest with myself and with others in that schedule is what's really helped me the most.
Yeah. Having the routine, does that like bring just like is like the why you take so much care of that, is like because it just makes things feel more comfortable, or like
Mm-hmm.
what specifically about that is intriguing?
Um, well, my psychiatrist told me that it is important for bipolar people to have a routine and kind of stick to that. And at first, I was extremely strict. Like, if we were out and about, I was like, we have to be home by 7 so I can take my meds and be in bed. Like, I wouldn't stay out, I wouldn't drink, I wouldn't do anything because I was so scared. And now, like, just the other night on Friday, we had Katie and Tanner. I don't know if she's still watching, but we had Katie and Tanner over, and we were up until 1 a.m. and I was fine. I just slept until 11 o'clock the next day. But it's not a strict routine. It doesn't have to be strict. You don't have to be so hard on yourself, but you have to make sure that it's there to some degree.
So having a good routine, that seems like a really important one. What other, you mentioned the medication as well, but like, is there anything else like from a behavioral standpoint that you do that you take that's really important to you to help kind of manage going forward?
I would say talking to Andy more about my feelings, being honest with him, like, hey, I had a really crappy day, let's talk about it. Or it could be on the other side of the spectrum, hey, I had a really crappy day, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I had to just be brutally honest with him, and it's taken him a while to accept that, not in a bad way. He's just chatty Cathy and loves to talk and loves to know about my day, and that's just who he is as a person. And you know as well as I do that that's not me. I am not chatty Cathy, but I've learned to do that for him and for myself, and it's been really good so far. I just take the drive home to decompress, whereas I used to decompress at home instead of in the car, so that I can talk to Andy when I get home, or we can talk about our days at dinner. So, and in my line of work, I'm constantly talking to people, telling them, hey, we're going to take good care of you. Do you have any questions, concerns? Hey, we're going to do this, 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 that. Like, I'm constantly talking to people and my coworkers, and that is exhausting for me because I'm not a talkative person at all.
You and my wife share that.
Mm-hmm.
You both have jobs where you're required to talk to and be around people. And so then at a certain point, when that's not your natural state, that just wears you down. You
Mm-hmm.
are, I think the way she words it is she's peopled out.
Yep.
She's peopled out. I am done. I'm done peopling and I'm good. And I'm going to go. It's like a verb now. And so that's a good way to describe it. Whereas like someone like me, like I get energy from talking to people. And so it's like if I'm sitting at home too long not doing that, that's when I start to go a little stir crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't necessarily relate that way, but I like the way you described it though, where you're saying, "Hey, I'm making sure that I set myself up for success by decompressing the way I need to decompress, but also understanding that like it is good, even if you don't necessarily have the energy to want to talk to Andy." He's still a very important person in your life. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're going to marry him, you live with him, like all these things. So being able to have your partner in on what's going on with you, it seems like it's been really helpful in terms of, managing your condition.
For sure. I've also, every time I go to therapy, I try to tell him what we talked about, obviously not in depth or anything, because that is very personable or personal. And he doesn't need to know every little thing that I tell my therapist, but I try to give him a summary, I guess you could call it, of what we talked about and how I feel about it. And he's really good about just listening and not chiming in or giving his opinion. He's just there, and that has become part of the norm for us. And it's been really nice.
Yeah, I like that. The summary, I like that.
The cliff notes, if you will.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Like with my Alexis, that's how I do it with her. Is like, especially if there's anything relationship wise, definitely want to cover that. But just high level. Hey, here's some things we discussed. Here's maybe a connection I didn't make. But yeah, you're right. Like I don't need to go verbatim
Right.
to every single word that was done. And I think it's also okay to like have things that are for you.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if there's anything with your relationship, right? In therapy, I think that's an important
Mm-hmm.
part of this equation too. So I want to actually kind of bring something full circle here, because your first therapy experience, as we said earlier, was pretty awful, and now it seems like you're at a good place with it. So how is your thoughts on therapy changed over the course of the last 20 plus years?
Um, Obviously, in a positive way, it's changed. And I really think that anyone and everyone can benefit from therapy. You don't have to be this traumatic filled person to benefit from therapy. Just having that outlet and having someone to talk to that isn't in your day to day life, who doesn't have um, opinions about it, they can remain neutral, is nice. And my therapist is really good. My therapist now is really good about reminding me that it's not my fault, because he knows that my first therapist told me that it was. He understands that I struggle with that, or I did struggle with that. So he's really good about reminding me, hey, it's your surroundings. It's how you were raised. It's the shit that life threw at you. It's not you. So it's really nice to hear that. And I really look forward to therapy now, which is just weird to say. Um, and I don't do it every week. It's like every month. So it's not like overbearing. I don't think I could do it every week. That would just be exhausting. But I do. I look forward to it. And it's really a positive change in my life now.
Nice. Glad to hear that. I agree with you. I think on some level, everyone could benefit from it. I think, frankly, this is my not not certified opinion. But if you are the person who thinks you couldn't benefit from therapy, I would argue you're probably someone that could benefit from it the most. Um, just because if you're at a place in life where you don't think you're capable of growing and learning from an objective source, then I have concerns. Um, but everyone. I also am a firm believer that I say that, but then I'm also a firm believer that everyone has to get there on their own terms. I can't push somebody to go to therapy. Like I don't want to. Frankly, like you're not going to get anything out of it. I know I've tried therapy at various other points in my life, and I didn't give a shit about it. and nothing really happened because it's a two-way street. They have to work with you, but you have to be a willing participant
Mm-hmm.
in the endeavor. And so while I am a huge advocate for it, you have to be in the right headspace to like go into it to get something meaningful out of it.
Definitely.
And I think that's sometimes what like corrupts it a bit too, is that like someone goes, they weren't in the right headspace for it for any one of 100 reasons. They have a poor experience. Not only do they have a poor experience and never do it again, but then they tell other people about that horrible experience, and then like that's how we get this like weird thing. When in reality, if we just gotten you there on like a natural way, I think that could have benefited. You could have had a really positive experience. So, and not all therapists are equal. Like they're human too.
Right.
Just because the way they approach it could not match with from a personality standpoint. I mean, and people are different. So like, because this thought's been brewing in my head since the beginning of this conversation, is like if someone wanted to like clip and do the shitty version of this episode, they could be like, well, she sounds like someone who likes to just put the blame on everyone but herself. You could do that. You could make that, because she says like, oh, it's about the environment, it's about them. If you were going to take the shitty, mean version of this, you could say, well, she doesn't want to take any personal responsibility for it. When I know full well that's not your story. So what would you say to somebody if they said that?
Obviously, they didn't listen to the whole episode.
Yeah, that's fair.
But they can't say that without knowing my full story. And you're just hearing a small part of it. It's just the big bullet points that they're hearing on this episode. It's not 29 years of experience. You're not hearing how I grew up. You're not hearing what I was put through as a child. That really impresses you as a child. When you're put through shit, you're gonna have a hard exterior. You're gonna put the blame on other things when you're told, hey, it's not your fault. Yeah, I'm going to blame how I was raised, how I grew up, what I went through, the deaths that I've had to deal with. And yeah, I'm gonna blame those, because they are the reason that I am who I am today, whether that's negative or positive. That's who I am, and what I went through made me who I am.
Yeah, but it's also about like, I think to me, it's also like a separation of, you can make the argument for excuses or you can make the argument for reasons. And I think those two definitions are very, very close to each other. And to me, the distinguishing part is an excuse is when you throw your hands up and then don't do anything about it. So let's take anxiety, right? You say, oh, well, I have anxiety, therefore nothing's my fault.
Yeah.
Because I have no accountability whatsoever. Because I have anxiety. I have the answer. I'm done. I'm done learning and growing. That's great. I have all the empathy in the world for someone who has anxiety. I'm someone with it. Like I have serious issues with it that have done a lot of damage to me over the years, and still do, frankly. But so I have all the empathy in the world for someone who says I have anxiety and they have that diagnosis. But then the follow-up is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to learn how to adapt and grow? Is it coping? And because I get it. We and I are big advocates for therapy, and not everyone has access to therapy for any one of 100 reasons. And so maybe it's not therapy, but there's so much information online, and there's breathing techniques. There's so many things you could try. It's not enough to just have a diagnosis and then do nothing with it. So I think that's where you fall into like the excuse, but you can say it's a reason. A reason has more foundation, because like, hey, this is going to take me a little bit more time to process. I do have issues with this. It is the reason why it's going to take me a little bit of time. Doesn't mean I won't solve the problem that you've presented in front of me. I'm not making an excuse saying it'll never get done because I have no accountability. I'm giving you a reason as to why I might handle this a bit differently than you're used to.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an important distinguishing part. Do you agree? Yeah.
Definitely. That's a better way to look at it, I think. That there are reasons, not excuses.
Yeah. It's been like, there's been a handful of, over the past, like, I've been on this journey now for the public side of it for like, 7 years now, something like that. And I think I have, there's been a handful of like missions that I'm really like passionate about, like moving forward. And one of them is, where do we go from here with mental health? Because I think that I think the stigma is getting better.
Yeah.
The stigma is definitely getting better. It's not perfect. It's definitely not good, but it's getting better. But there is still an audience of people who will look at you or look at me or look at somebody else and go, they just want to whine. They just want to whine. They just want to complain, and they don't want to take accountability and stuff. And I'm sorry, I'm calling bullshit. Not all of us are like that.
Yeah.
And so how do we counterbalance that? And so I think about that. So I like the way you answered it for that person for this episode, but just going forward, like what would be your advice to someone if they came to you and said, I have BPD, or I was recently diagnosed with BPD, or even anxiety on a more simple level? What would be your advice to them?
Don't let it define you.
What does that mean to
Because
you?
I did that for so long. From a young age of being mom's little worrywart to the anxious middle schooler that couldn't eat or couldn't sleep. I chalked it up to, oh, I have anxiety because the therapist told me so. Like, that's the reason why. No, that's not. It's who you are as a person. It's not a diagnosis. That doesn't define you. It shouldn't hinder you. It can, but it shouldn't always hinder you. And I would also tell someone, work on it, not just for yourself, but for the people around you, your kids, your family, your husband, your wife, your mom and dad. Like, they struggle with you. They, at least people who are in your life, like really in it, they struggle with you. They see you going through it. And it's hard for them too. Like, I've talked to your wife and my parents and people who have witnessed that firsthand, and they said that it's really hard to see. So I would tell that person, hey, get better for not only yourself, but for the people around you.
That's fair. I think it definitely has to start from within, but sometimes at the beginning it's a lot to take on for yourself, and are you ready for it? But then having that extra motivation, looking at the people in your life who care about you, it's a positive influence. At least I hope it is.
Yeah.
For a lot, it may not be for
Right.
everybody else. Yeah. And I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you for a lot of reasons, but doing this, I mean, I know this was a big ask. And like I said at the beginning, I was never going to ask you to do this, but I was hoping you would, because I felt confident knowing that you were in a better place to have this conversation. And I can tell you, like, I remember when you had your first manic episode, and I just getting clips from Alexis and seeing the things. I didn't know things like that actually happened in real life. Like, I'm not, like, not to be dramatic about it. I just mean, like, if you all could see what we saw, like, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
No, I have no other way to put it. Like, it was terrifying to witness, to see someone truly, like, break from reality. That's the easiest way I can describe it. And for you to come out the other side, not once but twice, and tackle this head on, and you haven't let it define you, as you said. You have grown in your career. You have grown in your relationship with Andy and your friends. I'm just so proud of you.
Well, thank you.
And of course, and I'm thankful that you came on and talked about this, because I think it's something we all need to know more about. We all need to learn more about these conditions, because they are very real. It's not as simple as what the movies want to make it out to be, or what the book says. Like, it's so important that we have these conversations. So
For sure.
I just want to say thank you.
Of course.
So normally this is the part where, because we're right at almost exactly an hour, and normally this is the part where I'm like, hey, what do you want to plug? Do you have a show or a book or anything? And I don't know that you have anything that you want to,
No.
but do you have any final thoughts or anything that people should know?
The biggest reason I came on here is to give awareness to bipolar, because growing up, we were taught that bipolar is this extreme thing, and I just wanted to raise awareness for it, because it's not as common as anxiety, as depression, as all these other disorders that we have. It's not that common, and you don't I don't know anyone else that has it, like has been truly diagnosed. I don't know anyone. So I just wanted to raise awareness, and you're welcome to follow me if you want to join my journey on it. I don't really post about it, but I do post about my life and my fiance and my cute little dog. But yeah, I just really wanted to raise awareness, and I couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else but you.
Well, that means a lot to me. And I hope you know that I think this would be of most importance. Like, I care deeply about this. So I appreciate you trusting me with that. You know, when I make a post about this later, I'll probably add in the comments, you know, any links that people can have to learn more about BPD, because frankly, I'm not the one who's equipped to this. That's part of the reason I wanted you here. I'm not equipped for this conversation, but I appreciate your willingness to step forward. People, this is a small tidbit, but people, the title of my book is One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction. And people often think it's referring to like one step in the right direction for yourself on your journey. That's actually not where I intended the quote, intended for it to come from. What I actually meant for it was, when we talk about mental health, it's really hard in a group of friends or family or stuff when you're sitting there and no one's willing to raise their hand and go first.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen it 1,000 times. Once you raise your hand and talk about something and be more open about it, you then subconsciously just gave everybody else in the room permission to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just seen it over and over and over again with friends and loved ones and people that I barely know, but like, they tell me these stories about, hey, I stepped forward. I was the one who raised my hand and said, hey, this is going on in my life, and watched as everyone else, we're all sharing in these experiences together. So this is a step forward that I could take, though. So I wanted to do that, and with somebody that I care deeply about. So if nothing else, I just want to say thank you again.
Of course. It was fun.
All right. See, not so scary.
No.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all very much. If you caught the end of this live, it will be up sometime before the end of the day today on Spotify as well as YouTube. It will be also on my Instagram feed. And Alexis should be tagged in that as well. And then I'm trying to think, is there anywhere else? YouTube, Spotify. I don't know. If you have ideas on where I can put this out elsewhere, please let me know.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Lex.
You're welcome. See you later.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.